Fibermaxxing week 3, vacation execution. What actually works when food is unlimited in Playa del Carmen at an all-inclusive resort. So what week 3 did and what it was designed to test. Let's go over this first. By week 3 of my 28-day Fibermaxx, the plan is supposed to feel lighter. Not because motivation is higher, but because the system should require less effort for me to run. The formal week 3 rules were simple, and these were designed to change from the past and help out with the Mexico trip. But here were the rules. Fiber for breakfast, one big fiber hit before dinner. Eat slower, set a 20-minute timer. That was fun to experiment with. And save extras for later when full, which turned out to not work at all at an all-inclusive resort because they really don't like you to take things home for some reason. And none of the rooms have microwaves. So, and for the baby, we ended up having to ask for a microwave because we needed to reheat like milk and stuff that we were giving to her. And it was a bit of a back and forth to get them to give us a microwave because they didn't understand why. But they eventually did. Not for leftovers, but for heating up the baby stuff. So anyways, on paper, this is the easy phase. And then, week 3 happened at an all-inclusive resort in Playa del Carmen. So I had unlimited food. I had buffets generally all day. They kind of open and close throughout the resort, blah, blah, blah. But pretty much any hour of the day, and including some late night hours, which I was never awake for, they had buffets available. Desserts were everywhere, and they were my kryptonite for this one for sure. So it wasn't really, this whole week wasn't a complication. It was a test of the system. Can fiber pull me through it? And let's dive into the details. So why I didn't want to bring the full plan on the vacation. The first thing that happened was obvious. The full week 3 rule set is just too much to remember on vacation. Tracking fiber grams, I don't know. Good luck with that. Checking calories, it's vacation. That's not so much fun. Remembering which meal counts as the big fiber hits, that could be definitely hard when you're eating everything at every buffet. Weigh-ins, which is not in my little notes here. Like, I didn't do weigh-ins. I didn't have my scale. And again, I don't bring the waist tracking measuring tape. It's fine. It works. I'm fairly consistent at using it, but it changes so slowly during a true weight loss. It's not very motivating, and it's very easy to cheat with it. So it's all of this stuff is unrealistic, especially when you're traveling with family. The meals are, every single one of them, social, and food is constantly available. And like high-end food, like always desserts around, always everything fried in butter and blah, 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 blah. So instead of forcing some kind of weird execution, I tried to simplify the plan down to just basic principles. So here's the Mexico version of week 3 on the Fibermaxxing plan. So it became fiber first at every meal if possible, beans, greens, fruit, no counting. Timer before I go after a second plate, because it's a buffet, you can eat unlimited. So setting a timer for 20 minutes. Stop at 2 plates total, one fiber forward plate or bowl, a bowl of beans and veggies, for instance, and I did that a lot, or one anything you want plate. That was it. No macros, no numbers, no perfection, just enough structure to slow things down. And if I have them later, I'll try and add in some pictures of some of these meals, but I don't think I took a lot of pictures of my various meals, which now in retrospect, I kind of wish I did, but I can still explain them. The gist will be there because this doesn't apply to, not everyone is going to end up at an all-inclusive resort, but you will have almost always access to Golden Corral or other restaurants where it's almost a similar deal. Lots of high-calorie dense foods. So let's go over the buffet reality here. Here's the part that I didn't really expect. The buffet at the Iberostar Resort where we stayed was actually good. This was not Golden Corral. This was like, it was better than the Vegas buffets that if you've had those, just the food quality's higher, the costs are higher, but like the individual items, they're not cardboardy garbage like you get at a lot of buffets, so you really can eat a lot. Every meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and this was really kind of nice, especially I guess because it's a Mexican resort with buffets, like probably wouldn't be so true in Europe, but even at breakfast, there was 3 to 4 bean dishes, and I really liked that. Like you could pretty much always get beans if you want to get beans and do a bean forward thing, or at least bean first serving, which of course beans is the easiest ever fiber hack. So there's always multiple vegetable sides, always salad, and not just salad, but like lots of different cooked vegetable sides. Of course, greens and salads, and lots of interesting fresh fruit. Passion fruit, which became a big favorite. And passion fruit, you're pretty much just eating the seeds of the passion fruit that are slightly coated with a delicious, sweet gel around them. I mean, it doesn't look that appetizing, but they're quite tasty. And if we're honest about raspberries, blackberries, blah, 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 all the fiber in those things is in the seeds. It's not in the flesh. And people don't talk about that too much with like some of these high fiber foods. But a lot of times, it's in this small place where a lot of the nutrition, the fiber, and all this other kind of stuff is. Whereas the sweet, tasty, fleshy part, that's not where the goodness is. The best stuff in an apple is in the skin. It's not in the flesh. So anyways, fiber availability during this all-inclusive, that was not a problem. If I wanted to be super strict and super fiber and super healthy and whole foods, that would have been easy. The bigger problem was abundance and little tastes into the dessert area, like expanding into 2 plates of desserts, so on and so forth. Again, it's vacation, but yeah, let's see what the numbers do, right? So this kind of started midweek into week 2, not midweek, but it started on Saturday because Saturday was the day we flew out towards Mexico. And so I didn't even really get to finish week 2 before this week 3 Mexico week begins. And that week went from Saturday to Saturday. So we flew out Saturday, flew back Saturday. Starting weight before flying out was 172 pounds. That's the lowest I've been in literally years. And so this is working and it's showing me signals that this plan, even if it's slow weight loss, is moving in the right direction. But, here we go, Mexico. The fiber habit is really starting to get set. It's there. I'm loving these big Chipotle, super high fiber, like get all my daily fiber in one meal habits. That's not going to be down there. So, or at least so I thought. Beans and greens first felt automatic. There's no resistance to starting meals this way. This alone is telling me something important. Week 3, these habits that I'm building of like fiber first, they're starting to stick. Sunday, unlimited food starts to wear me down a little bit. Sunday, the cracks start showing. I start every meal with beans and greens, and that quickly becomes truly the one rule for the week is like basically start with beans and greens. It doesn't have to be greens, but there's a lot of vegetables and it makes eating the beans a lot tastier and stuff like that. But basically a bowl of beans for breakfast and a bowl of beans first at lunch at least. And when available, a bowl of beans for dinner. And we went out to the restaurants in the resort a lot of times for dinner, so they didn't always have that bean option. But this was generally the strategy, like minestrone soup with beans if that was the only thing. But anyways, starting with beans, that was a really easy to remember rule and really easy to implement in Mexico. The timer between plates worked and it was fun. It was fun to like get my plate and then before starting eating, set that 20-minute timer. And basically I could either eat it slow or I could eat it fast, but I couldn't go back to the second plate until that 20 minutes was up. And that is definitely one of my 2 new hacks for that fullness factor to kick in with like the stretching of the stomach and eating slower. And it takes 20 minutes to register in your brain that you're full. The one way I do that is by adding like cabbage slaw or greens or something that just makes it take longer to physically eat because it's hard for me to slow down if the food is simple and good. Sorry, chia pudding, or green smoothies. I can just pound down 500 to 700 calories of that stuff in like seconds, but if you give me a timer, which is not so much fun, or cabbage slaw mixed into my cereal, which I know sounds weird, but it works for slowing you way the heck down. Because if you don't chew that, you're going to wreck your stomach with pain of all the sharp, unchewed cabbage. Anyways, one of the hacks, this timer hack, I did experiment with. It was fun. Probably not going to use it regularly forever. Similar to Pomodoro, it is great for its goal, but it can be taxing to do it every single meal. It's like counting calories too much. You get sick of it after a few months. But anyways, I didn't expect or want the timer to work. I wanted dessert. I wanted fries. I wanted hot dogs. I wanted to keep eating all the delicious things that were there. And the timer kind of got in the way of the overeating I wanted to do on my vacation. So I stopped using it. And in all reality, being back, I don't want to use the timer unless it's like a calibration check, like, oh, I'm eating too fast and my only options are blah, blah, blah. Like maybe then I will use it during times where I can't quickly get back to one of my core meals, like the next meal. But in general, timer not for me. So, and when a rule fails like this, it's not always because it's ineffective. Sometimes it's just because it's effective, but it's inconvenient and it's just not super effective for you as an individual or for me in this instance. So bean first is better than timers. Even when I abandoned the timer, the one rule that continued to be great is beans and greens first. A bowl of beans, a bowl of beans. Whole beans worked best because you have to chew them, and we can get into a lot more of the theory about more big chunky chunks make it down to the lower intestine, and then that feeds the bacteria. They send signals. I don't know, blah, blah, blah. Refried beans are not as great, at least for me. They're faster to eat, whereas whole foods or whole beans, and especially here, the beans that they made were very, I don't know how else to say it, al dente. They weren't the super smushy, soft ones like you get out of the can. They were more like you make them in the Instapot and you didn't set the timer long enough, so they're like they're not crunchy, but like they're in between. And that's good for feeding the gut bugs because you're not going to absorb that, like those partially like cooked, but still soft and somewhat crunchy parts, but your gut bugs are going to dine down on those, So, and even the refried beans here, I had some of those, but generally avoid it because I don't know what kind of fats and how much fats they put into them. But eating refried beans for me as an option, it was better than getting the pancakes or the pastries. And I don't know if I got the pancakes at all the whole week, So anyways, this hierarchy matters. Whole beans, then refried beans, and then if all else fails and you really want to binge, I guess, pancakes and pastries galore or ice cream for breakfast, So let's go into some, rule I've never used before. Desserts. Something unexpected happened with dessert here. Some of the desserts were amazing. Like if you've ever been to one of those all you can eat like Asian food buffets, a lot of times the dessert area is a bunch of fruits, like whole fruits, which is great, but then they have like these little cake slices, and they're almost always very cardboardy. They're just probably dried and too old. So they're always dry. They're not super tasty. Well, the buffet for desserts here was like that. It had all these, not taste-wise, but look-wise. I was like, oh, there's those little ugly cakes. But when you had one, it was like, oh, someone just baked this cake and cut it into very small pieces. They were absolutely delicious. And halfway through the week, almost impossible for me to avoid eating tons of them if I had one. They were definitely the thing that broke me. So, but even then, there were some desserts that were super duper good, red velvet, blah, 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 and other things that were not very good. And I went back to my OMAD rules almost for this one. If an indulgent food isn't bringing real joy, stop eating it and don't eat it again. And so I did. I would try things and I would find the things that I really liked and repeat those, sometimes to too much. And other desserts that were so-so and didn't really give me my like brain dopamine, whatever it is, hits that made me feel like I'm on drugs. I just didn't even try those. I didn't use them to slow down desserts. I just avoided them completely, Fiber, I find, doesn't always remove my desire for sweets, especially if I have like very starchy, like that, even the Chipotle burrito, which I just had one, I see myself wanting sweets afterwards, which is so weird because there's so much carb in it, but it's, I don't know, something about like that high protein, high fiber, super savory. It like brings on this sweet desire. So, which for me in the long run, it's why this like high fiber savory lunch followed by like some kind of sweet high fiber dinner, which for me is like a Fiber One cereal with like extra things added to it. That works really well for that weird combo just for me. So, okay, Monday, meal frequency became the real problem. Monday exposed another issue. Eating 3 full meals a day plus desserts caused overeating, even if I had fiber first. I just wouldn't stop. There were simply too many eating opportunities. I usually skip breakfast. It was hard to do here with having to feed the baby and then like better bean options at breakfast versus dinner. I started having breakfast every day at 8 a.m. and then dinner with the family was 6 or 7 p.m. This schedule, it didn't match how I like to eat. I prefer a tighter eating window, and skipping a meal, but really just means moving the calories from breakfast heavier into lunch is what I like to do. This vacation schedule wasn't respecting that. Fiber helped, But the meal frequency was still causing the calorie average to go way up. But it's only a week, so whatever. Tuesday, bean fasting. Tuesday was the cleanest day that I had of the week. I did some mild tracking, but not really firm MyFitnessPal every meal. I did coffee first, then a single bowl of beans and vegetables for breakfast. Tuesday was the first day I did this beans for breakfast or bowl of beans habit. No second plate. And that was kind of my breakfast for a lot of the rest of the week, was like coffee, and then I would have a bowl of beans and veggies, and that was good for breakfast. So I started calling this bean fasting. It wasn't restrictive. It was clarifying. Starting the day with a large, savory fiber hit reduced the urgency to keep eating later, to an extent. Midweek blur and what actually changed. This happens for me with almost most vacations. I have like this great plan in mind, and then like halfway through, however long the vacation is, I get sick of it, and it kind of goes to pot. So Wednesday through Friday, it all kind of blurred together, like most vacations do for me. Something was different from past trips, though. Normally, halfway through a vacation, all structure collapses, and I just go all out. And this time, it didn't. And I would say why? The beans. I didn't start every meal, but I started every breakfast with a bowl of beans and every lunch with a bowl of beans. Not fruit, because they didn't always have high fiber fruits available. Not salad. That's not super high fiber. Savory, satisfying beans. That does it for me. Sweet bean dishes, baked beans, no, they didn't have them, and I didn't like that stuff anyways. At breakfast, my favorite was this marinated pinto style beans, which I need to figure out a similar recipe at home because I really like that. And I think I have one that I've done in the past that's similar, using Instapot and a ton of spices. They also always had a side dish of cooked cactus with onions, and I really, really like that mixed with the pinto style beans. It was awesome. And then other vegetables sometimes added in. At lunch, beans again. The lunch buffet, the beans were not as good, but I still went with the plan. Bowl of beans first. Sometimes they did have these really tasty sausages, and we can say this or that about, there's no vegan stuff there other than fruit and beans. But these sausages, they were quite addictive, and I definitely ate way too many of them, but all mixed with the beans. So at least they had some fiber to kind of scrape out the nastiness to an extent. The environment made this easy. Same buffet, generally same foods, with changing entrees each time. At home, I'm going to try and replicate this with beans, but the reality is, and you'll see this in the future videos, the Chipotle meal was the easiest way to kind of replicate this in a way that works for while working. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about where things still broke down here. Desserts. The buffet desserts were great. The small portions, misleading, easy to sample. But even with the beans for breakfast, beans for lunch, once I started on breakfast or dessert, I just kept going. Three meals per day plus desserts is just too much. And it clarified an important limit for me. Fiber does not neutralize hyperpalatable foods for me. Maybe it does for other people. I think it does for people that like intuitive eating more, but intuitive eating, my breaks don't work very well, So once I get started with those hyperpalatable stuff, it's hard, like the sausage or like the desserts, it's hard to stop. So what works for me is delaying them. That delay can soften the impact. So beans for breakfast, beans for lunch, but it doesn't override the reward-driven brain craziness with desserts or the super tasty sausages. It's not a failure. It's just a boundary. It's something that I have to do. And again, this is only a week, but if I was to go forward, I would be attacking the sausage dessert issues with me as a way to, those are going to be sabotaging the plan if I stayed at this resort for a month, If I did have another week at the resort or a month or whatever, I'd just change one thing. I would reduce the number of eating events. Not different foods, not stricter rules, just fewer starts. I would stick with the coffee, alone for breakfast. Man, I wish I could keep some of those beans, because those beans at breakfast were the best. Beans for lunch, beans for dinner, then anything I want. Same food, fewer triggers. So Saturday, let's talk about coming home. Travel days are always messy. No beans at the Continental Buffet because we had to go really, really early. And they did have this weird limited buffet Continental, but there were no beans and it was mostly pastries. Nothing really high fiber, The airport burrito, which I got, had very few beans in it, but it still worked better than expected. It was very similar to a Chipotle burrito, kind of like all the ingredients wise. On the flight, I ended up eating several packages of Teddy Grahams because that was also one of the few things that could calm my daughter. She just wanted to walk, walk, walk. She's at that, I learned to walk, I have to walk. I can't sit here for 3 hours and not walk. And so Teddy Grahams and going to the bathroom kind of got over that a little bit, though we had a ton of turbulence on the way back and there were not a lot of walking opportunities. So, and then we got home that night, had some beans with vegan meat and then some ice cream. And, that's where the system broke. Ice cream, desserts, even with Fiber First, ice cream blew past fullness on that Saturday. And it does for me a lot because if it tastes really good, I can just keep eating even when I feel, oh, I'm full, and my brain recognizes that, but I don't care. I didn't eat to true fullness, before starting the ice cream on that Saturday. And, hyper palatable foods for me, they just bypass all my normal stopping signals. I can see the signals, but it's like I just drive through the red light anyways, and I don't care. Once my brain lights up with hyper palatable, like super tasty, I don't care if I'm full or not. The result for that Saturday, 2,400 calories, which could have been worse. Lots of servings, no friction. Fiber helps with my meals, but for me, it does not protect against late night reward foods or when I open the door into these super reward foods. And it won't work for me either to always say 100% no to them. So this is something that I will be working on through these future weeks to kind of dial this in. My Sunday weigh-in, here we go, 176.4 pounds, so up from 172. Not the end of the world, 4 pounds. A lot of that is probably like salt and things that changes. It's definitely sodium related. Every meal probably had tons of sodium. It was like going to eat out every single time, and there's no restaurant that doesn't really pack in the fats and the sodium to make things taste great. Travel kind of changes things, I guess. Desserts, yes. Disrupted routines. I would say mainly I just ate more. I probably gained 1 or 2 pounds of fat. Maybe. That'd be like 7,000 extra calories. Yeah, maybe I did. Who knows? It's not pure fat gain. It's definitely some water, definitely some other things. But it confirms something important. Fibermaxxing is excellent for maintenance under stress. Fat loss still requires respecting triggers, though, for me, and especially respecting calorie stuff. So if I need to be in a cut, I need to, watch calories through some mechanism, either by like counting them and stopping when I get to a certain number, or by like eating foods that kind of have controlled calories, controlled fiber, like my Chipotle burrito that I get the exact same way every single time. I just order it in the app. Boom, 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 boom. It's generally the same calories, even though it varies when they make it. So this is what I actually kind of learned from week 3. It wasn't a failure. It was an interesting like stress test of the system, and it clarified the rules that matter most in real life. Beans first is non-negotiable, or fiber first. Meal frequency matters as much as food choice for passive counting of calories. Eating speed strongly affects intake, and I can slow it down with a timer, not as much fun, or with other hacks like adding in crunchier, harder to chew up stuff into my food that makes it take longer. Fiber does not cancel hyper-palatable desserts or foods in general, like the sausage, so I got to watch out for that. And simple rules survive vacation, bowl of beans, eat your fiber first. Complex ones don't. These are execution lessons. It's not just theory. Like, this is what came out of this from the results. So, and this is how we're going to set up week 4 here. Week 3 was never about losing weight on vacation. It was about seeing, what bends, what breaks, what's worth keeping. And week 4 is where everything gets decided, what to do after vacation, the final 28-day results, which rules stay, and where Fibermaxx goes next. So if you're tired of plans that only work at home and you want a system that survives vacation, restaurants, and real life, watch the next video where week 4 covers what to do after vacation, the final 28-day Fibermaxx results, and where I go next. And if you want help building a version of this that fits your schedule, food preferences, and weak spots, click the link in the description below and get started taking action today. No perfection, no food rules, just a structure you can actually live with. Thank you much.